So the NDP leader is putting forward a motion calling for the acknowledgement of systemic racism inside the RCMP. The motion also had ways to stop systemic racism. That was denied unanimous consent. Why? Well, one MP of the Bloc House Leader, Alain Thériault, refused to support it. He allegedly made some kind of gesture that angered NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, who then called him a racist. Mr. Singh was asked to retract that and apologize. He refused. He was booted out of the House. Today, the Bloc leader, Yves-Francois demanded an apology from Mr. Singh and said if he doesn't, he should face a, quote, severe penalty. Again, a key part of this story, though, is why did this MP deny their systemic racism? No member of the Bloc would join us to defend their position or even explain their position. But it doesn't mean that's not a critical part of the story. But was Mr. Singh justified in calling an MP a racist? Let's get his view. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh joins us. Mr. Singh, always good to have you back on the program. The Bloc leader has asked you to apologize. Can you explain why you won't?
Well, first off, I want to make it clear, I've not named a party. It's not about one party. In a moment where we are trying to deal with racial discrimination and systemic racism, and there's been people that have been killed because of police brutality, people have been a victim of violence from the police, Indigenous people, Black people, racialized people. In that moment, to put forward a motion to stop this systemic discrimination, to name it and to stop it, when one person stands in the way of blocking something that would save the lives of Indigenous people, Black people, racialized people, and stop concretely in some ways some of the systemic racism, that to me is just inexcusable. And so I stand by that. But my goal isn't to name everyone who is a racist. My goal is to actually get the changes in place.
And I appreciate that, sir. As the leader of the party, though, when you do call someone a racist, and again, there's another side of this story, and I don't want anyone in our audience to think that there's only one side of this. Why this guy didn't support this is a huge part of the story. We cannot get him on air to defend that. So I just want to make this clear to everyone. There's two sides to this story, but because you've been good enough to come on, I want to ask you, at this moment, do you believe because Mr. Thériault did not support the unanimous consent, do you believe he is a racist?
I want to make this really clear. I've already said that, and I support that, and I don't back down from that. The fact that someone would stand in the way of stopping systemic racism, naming it, and then trying to stop it with some concrete steps, and the whole goal of this motion was really to push the Prime Minister of this country, Prime Minister Trudeau, and to push the Liberal government to actually do something. It's not about an opposition party. They're not the ones that created the systemic racism. It's about the parties in power that built these systems that are rife with systemic racism. It's about those parties being accountable, Liberals and Conservatives. And in this case, it's about Prime Minister Trudeau putting in place some changes. So that's what it's about to me. I don't retract the frustration and anger that I felt. That's how people feel. But really, this is about changing the systemic racism in a concrete way.
Right. And I appreciate that. And by the way, it was a powerful thing to see the impact this has had on you and on many people across this country. And I don't want to detract from that in any way. But one of the things you said has been interesting because this is a parliamentary debate, after all. You said anyone who does not agree with the statement that there's systemic racism inside the RCMP is a racist. Now, you and I both know that the former commissioner, or that current commissioner of the RCMP, Brenda Lucki, refused to say that there was systemic racism for days and days, and then on last Friday, she changed her tune. I guess by this definition, would you consider Commissioner Lucki a racist?
Well, and this is an important question because I've opened the door, and I want to be clear about this. We don't really get anywhere if I'm going to spend my time naming every single person that's racist or has done something racist. In that moment, the one person that stops a bill or motion that's going to actually make a difference in people's lives, I think that's a unique scenario. But day to day, what the goal should be is, I don't care who is in the seat or the position of the RCMP commissioner. If we don't have a government willing to do a review of the use of force, willing to reduce or emphasize the importance of de-escalation, willing to review the budget of the nearly $10 million a day we spend in the RCMP, and willing to commit that healthcare providers should respond to a healthcare crisis and not the police. If we don't have that willingness, and we can't get the Prime Minister or the party in power to do that, then it doesn't matter what each individual thinks or believes. We need to actually change the system, and that's legislation and policy.
Right. But sir, it's an interesting question, and I want to dig. I think the motion itself merits. because first of all, it had to do with acknowledging systemic racism in the RCMP. I was stunned that someone could disagree with that, but I know it's clearly an issue for the commissioner even. But part of the motion also has to do with police budgets, as you just talked about. Now, I don't know why this guy denied unanimous consent. He won't tell us, but let's imagine he simply says, look, I'm a parliamentarian. I don't like some of the ideas to fix the RCMP that Jagmeet Singh has put into this motion. For example, I believe that we should increase the RCMP's budget because rural policing is chronically underfunded. So I'm just not supporting unanimous consent on that. But we didn't know what he thinks because there was no time to debate it, and then he gets labeled a racist. Is that fair when you don't even know why he opposed unanimous consent?
I think there's just some moments in time when every other member of parliament in that chamber, every other party in that chamber looked at this motion and said, in this time, in this moment, when we have seen the images of Chief Alan Adam, when you've seen the video of the Inuk man being doored by the RCMP, when we've seen the deaths of so many racialized people at the hands of police, in this moment, does it make sense to in any way nitpick on a motion that would call for some really clear basic things? Doesn't say that we can't revisit the budget in the future. It just says we need to review it and that we need to respond with healthcare instead of police. And this is a federal jurisdiction. It's not about a provincial police. It's not anything provincial at all. So the fact that one person would stand in the way in this moment to do something about systemic racism, to me, just is inexcusable. But more importantly, it was a motion that would force the federal Liberal government to do something. It wasn't about targeting an opposition party. It was targeting Prime Minister Trudeau and the Liberal government to act. And we wouldn't even be in this position, frankly, if the Prime Minister had already acted on the numerous reports that say we need to do something about systemic racism.
And that's fair enough, but it was I guess it was a bank shot at him because you called him the racist. The Bloc leader, Mr. Blanchet, today tried to keep you out of the House for not apologizing. He's demanding that you do apologize. He's demanding you have a severe penalty because he doesn't think this is the way Parliament should act. What is your response to Mr. Blanchet?
Well, it's not about Mr. Blanchet or his party, and frankly, it's not about me or that one MP. It's about the people that need change right now. And I want to make it about them. It's about them, and someone to stand in the way of people that are desperate for change, to me, is wrong. But now, really, I don't want that one MP to apologize to me for his dismissive gesture, his rudeness, and the fact that he stood in the way of blocking systemic racism. He's an opposition MP. I don't want him to apologize to me. It's not about me. I want the Prime Minister of Canada to bring in some changes so that we can save lives.
Just last thing. Before I let you go, some people keep saying the apology, and I think you're 100% right that people are going to miss the bigger story when would you apologize or would you not? And I don't want to lose sight of the ball here because systemic racism is the thing we got to focus on. But will you in the future be careful because calling someone a racist is a big term, right? And as you can see, it garners national news attention when this happens. Did you regret saying it, or will you be unafraid in the future to call it out again and call someone a racist again?
Well, I'll be unafraid of taking on systemic racism and calling out what's wrong. I don't think that we gain much if I'm going to spend my time trying to name every racist. That's not going to be my job, and I'm not going to do that. I don't want to spend my time doing that, and frankly, it doesn't help the problem to spend all my time doing that. I want to see some changes, and I'm going to continue to push for those concrete changes.